making sure the live stream to YouTube is working. If it's not yet, know that it is about to be.
Great. Yeah, and we appreciate this community's support for those who can't get in. We had over 1,500 folks express interest in this session. You are the lucky 500 who made it onto this Zoom. But obviously there's significantly more who are going to be watching with us on YouTube. So Erin, I'm gonna ask you to post that YouTube link in the chat one more time so folks can share that with their friends who weren't able to join in this Zoom room with us today. So if you all want to go to your social profiles, send that out. Make sure we're keeping the spirit of community and this work flowing forward. And Corinna, I'm going to wait for you to start our intros.
I think that the YouTube issue may be handled by other wonderful colleagues, so let's get going.
Great. Yay! Perfect. Welcome, friends. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you for being here. It is beautiful to see. I mean, there are 20 pages of faces here on my screen, but I can see some beautiful familiar ones on this first page here, and just incredibly thrilled and energized and invigorated that you all chose to join us this afternoon. My name's Hannah Fenlon. My pronouns are she and her, and I am the former Associate Director of Conferences and Fieldwide Learning at TCG. This is my first TCG conference in a while to not be behind and inside of the machine, but I am honored and grateful to be able to hold space for this important conversation. And I will pass along to my brilliant friends, colleagues, co-facilitators, Corinna and Nick.
Hello. Hi, sorry, you go, Nick.
Nick Slie from New Orleans, Louisiana. I use he, him, his pronouns. The co-artistic director of a company called Mondo Bizarro. I also do a lot of work with alternate roots.
I'm Corinna Schulenburg. I am Director of Communications at TCG. I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I am also the person who is really trying to make this YouTube work for all of our other colleagues. So I apologize for my split focus. It will not be split for long.
So yeah, we're going to begin today with a land acknowledgement. And I want to say, for those of you who are familiar with the practice of land acknowledgement, we're really just acknowledging the indigeneity of the places that we are from and the places that we've arrived to. And if you want to, within the chat, while I am acknowledging both the and where I am and the digital land acknowledgement we're going to share, it would be great if you can also add that the places that you are coming from, so we can see that. But I acknowledge that I am from the unceded territory of Balbancha, which means land where many languages are spoken. And I acknowledge the people who have lived in this land for centuries, including the Chitimacha, the Homa, the Choctaw, the Biloxi Chitimacha, the Coushatta, the Attakapaw. And I also acknowledge that acknowledging is only one step, and that action is another very important step. And one of the things that we've learned from our colleague Claudia Alec was that we have also been sharing this digital land acknowledgement. So Hannah, I wonder if you could share that on the screen so that we can see it as we're reading it.
Should be up there, Nick.
Right there it is. So land acknowledgement is disruption. It is a time to consider the history of these lands and waterways we are so privileged to gather on today. And since our activities are shared digitally to the internet, let's also take a moment to consider the legacy of colonization embedded within the technologies, structures, and ways of thinking we use every day. We're using equipment and high-speed internet not available in many indigenous communities. Even the technologies that are central to much of the art we're about to talk about leaves significant carbon footprints, contributing to changing climates that disproportionately affect indigenous peoples worldwide. I invite you to join me in acknowledging all this, as well as our shared responsibility to make good of this time and for each of us to consider our roles in reconciliation, decolonization, and allyship. And that was shared by Adrienne Wong, Spider Joe. And I'll pass it over to my colleague Hannah.
Because of what I'm doing right now, which is sharing my screen, I don't have access to the chat, but I do want to make sure we invite folks to share any land acknowledgements for the space that you may be set upon right now. You can put those in the chat, creating sort of a group tapestry of all of the spaces that we are currently in. So inviting you to do that as we move forward, inviting folks to sort of take note of that and the different ways in which folks are acknowledging the land and the original stewards of the land. I'm sharing here a set of community agreements from our fantastic colleague, Claudia Alec, calling up. If one of my co-facilitators wants to put in the chat a link to Claudia's website and work, I think that would be really wonderful. Claudia prepared these. She's done a significant amount of work with respect to transmedia performance. She has been preparing for this moment. She knows what it is like to work in digital space and collaborate in that way across distance. So she shared these community agreements. They've been edited slightly for our particular space, and I want to offer them to this group now, followed by a few additions that are specific to our work together today. So we will care for our bodies and move as needed. Get up, get a cup of coffee, stretch, yawn. It's okay. Claudia also talks about having relaxed meetings, particularly in this space of the Zoom box. We will co-create space for everyone to contribute. We've done our best to do that as facilitators today with our agenda. And we also invite you to do that in the space of the breakout sessions that we'll get to later in this agenda. Those of us most comfortable responding quickly will create space for other voices. Those of us less comfortable responding verbally and quickly will speak and be heard. So again, acknowledging where this shows up when we split up into smaller breakout sessions later on. We will honor productive silence. Wow, on Zoom, this is such a big one because silence can be interpreted in many ways and it occurs for many reasons. So honor that productive silence. We will avoid crosstalk. Being really mindful both of how we're showing up in technology, how we're creating space for each other in those group moments, small group moments. We will be fully present with each other and resist the urge to multitask. We will use the mute button when not speaking to prevent background noise. Appreciate you all for taking responsibility for that right at the beginning of this call. We will use message and hand signals to communicate to others before speaking. There's actually should be a little raise your hand button when you go into the participants tab of this Zoom room, and you can use that, and we encourage you to do so later on when we get to the report out portion of our agenda. Feel free to practice doing it now if you want. We will turn on our video wherever possible, but know that if that's not the space you're in, please, by all means, leave it off. We will manage time together. And we will always get consent. And one of the important things to point out here to just sort of extrapolate on that community agreement is stories stay, lessons leave. So this is a private Zoom link, which means that folks may be sharing stories and experiences that are quite vulnerable. And we ask that what you learn from those stories, you take away and you integrate into your work to be an anti-racist, active member of our communities. But their individual details, you let stay in this moment and in this virtual space. So I know there's a lot of different community agreements that folks use in their parts of the world. If you are feeling really urgently about adding one to the list, you can drop it in the chat for other folks to consider. I am going to share a couple more things before we sort of lay some groundwork, lay some spiritual groundwork, as it were, for how we're going to move through our agenda today. First is just acknowledging the complexity of technology. So grateful for you all and your patience with us today. We have made, deep thanks to Corinna and the team at TCG, a significant pivot over the last 24 hours to invite over 1,500 white folks in the theater field to this session. And they've had to make some significant technological shifts in order to do that and try to ensure folks can participate. I'm hearing a bit of a howl round, which typically means that somebody doesn't have their button muted. So if you just want to be mindful of that. I want to also offer that when the technology freezes, because it will, there will be hiccups. There will be moments where it's like, ooh, are we supposed to be silent? There will be howl rounds, as is happening now, as I'm hearing myself come back to myself. I encourage us to not worry, to perhaps do a body scan, take a breath. We'll move back into the session momentarily, but if you can use that time, to check in with yourself, it might be really useful. I spoke a little bit already about logistics, but just reminding us that there are 500 people on this call, and that in the space wherein we're gonna invite report outs, we're gonna do our utmost to hear as many voices as we can. But keep in mind that, you know, as we try to share space, it's possible that your comments, your report out won't be heard. And we imagine that in the, what we're trying to create at the end of this call, that you will be building some relationships where you'll be able to share those reflections and those learnings with other folks. And finally, I just want to really drive home that Nick and Corinna and I are not coming to you as experts. We are not coming to you as folks who are purporting to be at the top of the hierarchy with respect to doing this work. We come to you as members of your community, as folks working alongside you who are imploring ourselves and our greater nucleus of theater folks, of white folks in the theater, to step into our power to battle and dismantle racism. We as a trio, and I'm going to speak for all three of us, have failed countless times and will continue to fail in our process of doing this work. We will fail today. So please meet us here with grace and a willingness to fail and learn and act alongside us. And we thank you in advance for doing that. So I'm going to share briefly an agenda and then pass it on to Corinna and Nick. We are already well into our opening. We're about to move into our invitation to softness and reflection. We're going to share a little bit about May. So we came together with about between 100 and 150 of our closest friends and colleagues in May at the first half of TCG's two-part conference. And we'll tell you a bit about what we did then, share some resources. We're going to talk about what we know is true. We're going to root ourselves in facts. We're going to root ourselves in the key issues of this moment, the key calls to action in this moment. And we're going to give ourselves a call to action. We're going to speak specifically about our anti-racist white ancestors and their legacies. And then we're going to spend a good amount of time really focusing on what it means to be accountable. What does it mean to be accountable to Black and Indigenous people of color in our communities? What does it mean to be accountable within our white anti-racist institutions? What does it mean to share accountability with other anti-racist white folks? And what are we doing now today in this 90 minutes to make that accountability manifest? And then we'll close. And that will just be the closing for today. For many of you, maybe the beginning of this work. For others of you, maybe a one notch in a row of conversations and actions. So I offer that as our agenda, and I want to send it back to my colleagues to guide us into that work.
Thank you, Hannah. It's so wonderful to be here with you all. I'm glad we made this tech work. I'm glad you are all here. Thank you. I am here to provide an opportunity for reflection and for softness and for vulnerability, which is hard for us. And so we're going to begin with an embodied exercise, which is possible in Zoom. Each of us is bringing into this meeting a lot of things that are vibrating in our body, emotions that may be powerful in a positive way and emotions that we may be struggling with a little bit. And we're going to co-create a poem about our bodies and the emotions that are in them now. And then we're going to use that to move into a reflective space about some of the lives we've lost to anti-Blackness. And then we are going to, I'm going to turn it over to Nick to bring us home with a poem. So the way this is going to work, and the last time we gathered together, we created some really beautiful anti-racist poetry, so I know that we can do it this time too, is you're just going to create poems, put them into the chat box that are very simple. name an emotion that feels primary to you in this moment, and then just say where it lives in your body. It could be you're feeling really happy to see this many white folks showing up for anti-racism, and so you want to say joy lives in my cheeks. Or it could be that you dealt with a bunch of really stressful tech issues at the beginning of this, and you want to say stress lives in my lower back. All of that is valuable, and we're going to create this poem together. And if you are watching on YouTube, I invite you to do the same in the comments there. And together we will create one big, beautiful poem about where our bodies are right now. Y'all, this is so beautiful. Thank you for sharing what is resonating in your bodies and where it is resonating. Keep going. We'll be in this for just a moment longer, and feel free to read where everyone else is in their bodies right now. All right, and now we're gonna draw this to a close, and we're gonna take all of those emotions, and we're not gonna breathe them away, but we are gonna breathe through them. So we'll do one shared breath. And out at your own pace. And now I'm going to ask you to keep breathing and stay with me in this meditative space as we consider where hope lived in George Floyd's body, where empathy lived in James Scurlock's body, where urgency lived in Breonna Taylor's body, where sadness lived in Tony McDade's body. And we'll take a moment of silence to feel the absence of those bodies. And keeping with our breath, I'm going to ask Nick to share a poem to bring us out of this reflective space.
So, I don't know about you guys, but the poets have surely been making a lot of sense these days. And in remembering that our practice is so powerful to how to meet this moment, we pulled a poem called The Small Needful Act by Ross Gay is that Eric Gardner worked for some time for the Parks Rec Horticultural Department, which means perhaps that with his very large hands, perhaps in all likelihood, he put gently into the earth some plants which most likely, some of them, in all likelihood, continue to grow, continue to do what such plants do, like house and feed small and necessary creatures, like being pleasant to touch and smell, like converting sunlight into food, like making it easier for us to breathe. So Hannah, take it away.
Sorry, thank you for your patience. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Corinna. Thank you, everyone, for that moment of sharing. I want to center us as we move forward in our agenda to just remind us, especially those folks who joined us in May for our session. Here's what we did. And what I'm going to ask Corinna and Nick to do is share some of the resources that are in our agenda in the chat. So folks, just be aware that we're going to be pushing resources out. There's a lot of folks in the chat, so if we want everybody to be able to see them and click them as we go. So in May, we were as now in the thick of COVID-19. We made space for pain and for perspective, gaining perspective on that pain, the pain of us as white folks, as white bodies who are prioritized by the healthcare system. We spoke the truth about how the impact of the virus is racialized. We introduced folks, and for some reminded folks, of the concept of white supremacy culture, thanks to Tima Okun, and Nick's gonna share that in a moment, and Kenneth Jones. And we translate it to our largely remote and online atmosphere and discussed what antidotes and strategies we were using to dismantle it in this time of physical distancing. We discussed where we have influence and where we can specifically and bravely use our power. And finally, we named the world we wanted to come back to post-COVID and articulated not just that dream, but how we can be personally responsible for making that world a reality. It is not enough to say, I want to see this world. We must hold ourselves accountable to being party to the shifting of that world and say specifically how that is going to happen. So that's what we did in May. And some of the work, the resources that we worked from to create that agenda are now in the chat for you, if you'd like to do that reading. And that's what I'll share about that. Corinna, here's what we know is true.
Thank you, Hannah. So there are some things that we collectively know are true, and the work that we do today is based on those things that we know. We know that right now we are meeting amid a pandemic that disproportionately impacts communities of color. Nationally, Black deaths from COVID-19 are nearly 2 times greater than would be expected based on their share of the population. We know that in 42 states, including Washington, D.C., Latinx people make up a greater share of confirmed cases than their share of the population. In 8 states, it's more than 4 times greater. We know that in New Mexico, Native American communities have accounted for 60% of cases, but only 9% of the population. And we know that Black and brown folks are overrepresented in essential jobs that increase their exposure to the virus, and that physical distancing is a privilege, and that structural racism has always been a pre-existing condition. These are things we know. We know that structural racism begins before children are even born, in the access that parents have to food, to healthy food, in the access to care, maternal care that will prioritize the life of their children and of the birthing parents, in their access to education, and when they do receive education, we know that Black and brown folks will be disciplined at higher rates than white children. This is a part of the prison industrial complex, the pipeline that people have written about. We know this to be true. We know that Black and brown people are disproportionately represented in our prisons, whether those prisons are detention centers for our undocumented neighbors, or those who do possess citizenship, but a citizenship that is constantly under siege. These are things that we know to be true. And we know that Black and brown people, and as we are centering our Black family today, are particularly vulnerable to police brutality. Native and Black folks experience police brutality and murder at much higher rates than white folks. And to talk more about that, I'm going to bring it over to Nick.
Yeah, we know that the social and the physical distancing hasn't stopped the brutal killing of Black civilians at the hands of white people, police officers, and otherwise. And we've been reminded yet again that Black, Indigenous, and people of color lives are expendable in the eyes of the state, as well as in the eyes of many white folks in their communities who are unable to resist the doctrine and the influence of white supremacy. And we know that this moment is a spike, and it seems like everyone is fighting at once, and everyone is enraged, and everyone is angry, and it's wild because we are fighting two deadly diseases at once, racism and COVID. But what happens when the protests fade? And does it really take the tragic deaths of community members of color to remind us that racism is always present? And how can we not let this be an isolated moment of rage? Because it's not enough just to be not racist. We can't rely on our lack of racism to do the work for us. Because when we do that, we risk a complacency that continues to do further harm. Hannah.
Some parts of what I wanted to share were removed from our beautiful script, but I'll offer what I know is true. So one of the things that we need to be present to in this moment and in all moments is the grief, the anger, the outrage of our friends of color, of our Black friends, of our community members of color, of our Black community members. This is the way that we manage, the way that we respond to this moment of intense outrage, to what we're seeing in communities across the country will define how and if we move forward as an anti-racist movement. And I want to, I want to share from Ibram X. Kendi, just a series of tweets. So we talked about Dr. Kendi in our last session together. And Dr. Kendi does a beautiful job really explaining for us, laying it out for us, the difference between what we perceive as a riot and what is a rebellion. So I actually just want to invite us to sit with this for a moment and just take 2 minutes and just let it be in our bodies. So again, if we choose to move towards anti-racism, we must know the facts. We must check our sources. We must know our history and constantly reframe the conflict we are seeing in our cities. It is not a riot, but a rebellion and a reflection of 400 years of anguish. And I want to back us up a minute, I think, to make sure that we don't miss something that we wanted to share prior to this conversation around today, this moment, and to bring us back momentarily to Dr. King. Nick?
Yeah, and that notion that our lack of racism is not enough. We were really thinking about this quote by Dr. King and aware of how many people are moving Dr. King's words and Dr. King's ideas into the conversation right now. But this quote that centers white people specifically was very important. So we'd like to take a moment and just read this and let this be in our bodies, because we're going to use it today.
Nick, do you want to also?
And I invite you, just invite you to start thinking about, because we'll return to it, but what is it for us that is a negative piece, that absence of tension, versus a positive piece, which is the presence of justice?
Yeah, and I just want to bring our attention, Nick and Corinna, to this lovely request in the chat that we actually do read it aloud. Nick, would you do that for us?
Thank you. First, I must confess that over the past few years, I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in his stride toward freedom is not the white citizen's counselor or the Ku Klux Klanner, but the white moderate, who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I cannot agree with your methods of direct action, who paternalistically believes that he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by a mythical concept of time and who constantly advises the Negro to wait for a more convenient season. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for your patience in these moments where we're trying to take in the chat, take in your suggestions and respond accordingly. So appreciate it very much. And thanks also for this lift up of the white moderate and the white liberal. I think that's a really important thing to name in our moment. One of the things we also thought about sharing was a piece that we'll put in our resource documents that is responding to the incident with Amy Cooper and Christian Cooper, and the way in which there was a sort of social media wide assumption that she was conservative, that she was a Republican, and the damage that it does when we assume that only folks that are across the other side of the political aisle from us can harbor deep racism. It is in all of us, folks. So I also want to acknowledge that we have been and are working on captions. I think in part of the process to move and change the tech, there were a few hiccups, but we can provide updates on that as well. So friends, we cannot let our own fear, our own sense of risk, our own anxiety about getting things wrong stop us from making decisions that lead to the liberation of our whole community. Before we move into really activating ourselves in small groups to talking about accountability, just a brief call to action that integrates some of the folks who did not let fear and anxiety stop them from action. Some of the folks in our lineage, our legacy of white anti-racists, many of whom you're probably familiar with. John Brown, was hanged after leading an insurrection intended to start a slave liberation movement. William Lloyd Garrison was a prominent American abolitionist, journalist, suffragist, and social reformer, best known for his anti-slavery newspaper, The Liberator. Michael Schwerner and Andrew Goodman were two of the three Congress of Racial Equity, or CORE, field social workers who were killed along with their Black movement colleague James Chaney by members of the Klan in Mississippi, working during the Freedom Summer to register Black folks to vote. Jonathan Myrick Daniels, a seminarian and civil rights activist, murdered in 1965 while shielding 17-year-old Ruby Sales, who went on to become an absolutely world-shifting activist. Viola Luzzo participated in the successful Selma to Montgomery marches, helped with coordination and logistics, and was murdered after coming back from a trip shuttling fellow activists to the Montgomery airport. Oh, friends, the internet. This is one of those moments. Okay. Anne Braden, the marvelous Anne Braden, civil rights activist from Louisville, charged with sedition after she and her husband purchased a home on behalf of a Black couple who were unable to live in the neighborhood where they wanted to live, served as a field organizer, participated in the formation of the Southern Organizing Committee for Economic and Social Justice. Virginia Foster Durr, civil rights activist and lobbyist, a leader in the Southern Conference on Human Welfare. So folks, I'm actually gonna go back and linger on that slide. Folks, these are some of our anti-racist white legacy. These folks are in our lineage. Who else can you share? And you can put it in the chat. Who else is in that lineage? Can we share collectively? Can we create collectively a list of our ancestors? Maybe they're our peers. Maybe they're our elders who are still current, who are still with us, our youngers, the folks who inspire you and push you forward in this work. Let's take a moment to honor them, just a few moments. Their names in the chat. Who are our white anti-racist leaders, elders, youngers, members of our legacy? Amazing. Beautiful. Thank you. Wonderful. Awesome. Thank you. Yes, Robin. Great. Gorgeous. And keep typing. And as we do, keep typing or stop typing, whatever feels right to you. These are our ancestors. These are our siblings in this movement, in this work. They show us what is possible. We show each other what is possible. Let's take a moment, make sure your feet or your body is located in a place where you feel centered. Empty all the breath out of your body. And as you breathe in deeply, breathe in their stories, their strength, their ferocity. Hold the breath at the top as you thank them for their sacrifices, and breathe out as you prepare to take on their legacy, as you prepare to move that legacy forward. Beautiful. Nick, do you want to take us into the next part?
Yeah. So standing in what we know to be the power and the bravery of so many people, past, present, and future, that we know, it's wanting to center ourselves and asking ourselves the question, how are we going to be accountable to this moment? So we're about to prepare to do some reflecting exercises, and as you're able, if you have something around you that you're able to scribe or write with, you want to write on your phone, or maybe you just want to think this out, we're going to be moving into a bit of reflection. And one of the frames that we would like to offer is that this moment is so important for so many reasons. And when we started to meditate upon the different things we're being asked to do, we realized that so many of us are being given protocols, health protocols for reopening, very specific, scientific, incisive well thought out protocols, hand sanitizer on the desk, standing 6 feet apart. And most people that are returning to work or returning to the life that they had are being asked to do so in a different way. And so our question started to become, what are the protocols for dismantling structural racism? And how are we right now organizing and defining with the same precision of those that are writing health protocols, the ways that we want to engage and return and to build the world that we want to see? And so that's what we want to start thinking about. And the way we're going to do that to start is I'd like for everyone to, as you are able, grab something you can scribe with, write with, have something there so that you can take some notes, even if you just need to take them in your head, and you're going to bring this into your small group conversations. And I'll give you a second to get that together. And this is prompt number 1. So are we in relationship with people of color? And if the answer is yes, do we actively discuss racism within these relationships? And do we strive to be in right relationship? And by that, we mean relationship that allows vulnerability, accountability, and openness to critique. So do we strive to be in right relationship in moments where our white supremacy and our internalized white superiority arises? And what steps could you take to deepen and bridge your personal relationships in this way? And we're really talking about relationships that are not embedded in hierarchy, that you employ or a Black or an Indigenous person of color, but relationships that are about true accountability. So that is prompt number 1, and I think Hannah is going to share it also on the screen. It's going to take a moment, 3 minutes, to reflect and to write about that prompt. So I invite you to round that thought out. And we're going to offer you a second prompt. Whenever Hannah is ready.
Full transparency, I'm going to put it in the chat and then I'll get to it on the slide. I didn't have time to edit it, but we'll put it in the chat. Do you want to verbalize it, Nick?
So, second prompt. We're going to give you 2 minutes for this one. And so our second prompt is similar, but it pivots. And that is, are we in relationships of accountability with anti-racist? Do we actively discuss anti-racism within these relationships? And how could we develop more of these relationships or them if we haven't already? Are we in relationships of accountability with other anti-racist white folks? Do we actively discuss anti-racism within these relationships? And how could we develop more of these relationships if we haven't started to build them already? That's also going on the chat and will appear on the screen. 2 minutes. About 30 seconds. And as you're closing up that thought, I'll invite Corinna to share the next one and lead us into our group discussion.
Thank you, Nick. So for this final reflection, during your writing, what did you notice about the places where you could inspire growth? What do you recall about true moments of accountability that you've experienced? In other words, what is working for you that you could share? And where is a place that you could use support from other folks who are invested in doing this work? So what's going to happen now is we're going to take a brief moment to reflect on those prompts as Hannah prepares to move us into small groups. We're going to be in those groups for around 20 to 25 minutes. And what you're going to do there is share your reflections about accountability, about something that you have to share that may be of use to others who are doing this work, but also a place where you might need help. And to be super clear, this is not an invitation for you to share your Black friend or of performing your wokeness. Please only share what you think will be useful to people in the struggle of doing this work with integrity. And who are really trying to be accountable, knowing that accountability often means living in discomfort and welcoming being called in when we're performing racism. So I'm going to check in with Hannah to see if we're ready to go into breakouts.
Yeah. There's one more thing though that I wanted to share. Sorry about that. There's one more thing I wanted to share with respect to this reflection and operating in breakouts. I saw in the chat that folks were sort of grappling with, is this me? Is this my institution? We had intended with the prompts to really ask folks to think about themselves as individuals. But another question we wanted to ask you is to think about your relationship of accountability within the white racist institutions where we have agency and power, and to the field at large. So as you're reflecting, this reflection can be not just about your own interpersonal one-to-one or one-to-several relationships to individuals, but also the relationships that you have within and relationships that you have to the organizations that you work with, work for, work around, work adjacent to. So just want to offer that. We can sort of complicate it a little bit more.
And Hannah, can I offer one more thing that's logistical?
Sure.
Just for our friends who are participating via YouTube, our TCG colleagues and friends are going to be sharing Zoom rooms for you to do these breakout groups with. It may already be happening, and I may not have even needed to say this, but look for that, because we're also wanting to make sure folks who are participating on YouTube can also engage in these breakout spaces. That's it, Hannah, back to you, please.
Great. And once I put folks into these breakout sessions, I just want to offer that what will happen is it'll happen automatically. You'll be in a breakout session. Oh, my video's off. You will have agency to leave if that breakout room is not working for you, and we can reassign you. So just click leave breakout if that feels like what you need to do. You are under no obligation to remain in that room that was automatically assigned to you. And then I also want to offer that we'll message out to those rooms, because we can message out all of the little atoms of rooms, some of these prompts and some of these things that we're hoping that you'll be able to share and deepen into conversation with your group. And we'll have a good 20 minutes in those groups. So there will be time for juicy conversation, which I encourage you to not spend on introductions. All right. There's also a function in the breakout rooms wherein you can ask a question to the hosts. So if you are having something that, pops up, you need one of us in the space, technically, logistically, or otherwise, you can utilize that to be in touch with us once you get in the rooms. So I'm going to work on creating those now. Nick and Corinna, if there's stuff coming up in the chat, I am not looking at it. So I just want to name that. Okay, it looks like the most we can do. We're going to have about 8 or 9 folks in every room. And here we go. One second, friends. Let's see. Let's see if it works this way. Okay. There we go. So everyone should be invited to join a breakout room shortly. The size of this call may mean that it takes just a few moments to get going. And perhaps also the usefulness of my 5-year-old MacBook Air it's doing the best it can. And if you've gotten a little thing pop up that says, would I like to join a breakout room? Please say yes. Yeah, thank you everyone for being so darn patient. I think the size of this call is just making it take a little bit of time to get those invitations out to the individual rooms. And if it doesn't start to do active invites in the next 2 minutes, we may just need to make the rooms a little bigger so there's not quite as many. Let me try this one more time. Make them a little bigger.
I mean, definitely using this time to appreciate Hannah in the chat is not a bad use of this time.
Oh my gosh, I didn't see that. Thank you. I really want us to be able to be in conversation with each other, folks. Oh my gosh. Guys, I have to say my college advisor just appreciated me in the chat, which is a real blessing. Hi, Daniel. All right, let's recreate this for a second here. Let's try to go a little bigger. And Corinna and Nick, what I hope I can count on you to do is start thinking about it's a small backup plan.
I got backup plans for days. Oh, look. I see an invitation.
Hey!
Great work, Hannah.
Just had to make the rooms bigger.
So calm. So calm.
A lot of practice. Yay, I got an invite. Get out of there. Get in those rooms. And we'll send you a message with the prompts just as a reminder of what to discuss.
I'll work on it.
Thank you. Goodness. It's a big Zoom.
Oh, I see a couple of friends who are still here with us. Hello, Abby.
Hi. I got bounced out of Zoom because of my internet, and then I don't think I got into a room. So feel free to drop me wherever. Hi, Corinna.
Abby, I don't see you as unassigned just yet. So as soon as you come up for me, I'll assign you.
Thank you, Hannah.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Are these others not assigned as well?
No, it's just folks who probably dropped off the call and are not actively participating because you have to say yes to join the room.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah, so that's all.
Perfect.
We've had a pretty steady stream of people that have continued to join throughout. In fact, here are more.
Yeah.
Are you seeing an opportunity to welcome in Abby? Because if not, we could have our own little.
I think what I'd like to do, I think it's just that people are still going in, so it's just taking me a moment on the. So yeah, so now I have unassigned people that I'm assigning. So if Nick, you want to send that message out or send, you won't be able to do it actually. So yeah, let me because I got to broadcast it to the rest of the rooms. Okay, let's see here. Oh, we were asked, give me 1 second and I will make this happen.
Just a note, we went in at 2:59.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
One other thing I'm going to broadcast to folks for just a second. And Devin has requested that we share the screen so that they're visible on YouTube. So I'm going to try to do that. And folks who just jumped in, I'm going to assign you to a room so you can be in community. There we go. Awesome, awesome. And folks on YouTube, we know that you can still hear and see us. And we're going to post the information up on the screen. I'll share my screen in just one moment. Thank you for your patience. Abby, I feel like you, let's see.
Hannah, can you also make me a co-host again so I can manage the waiting room?
I'm working on one thing and then I will. Okay.
Erin, I think, oh no, I can't do that. But I could.
Hannah, would it be useful for the folks on YouTube to really reiterate the first 2 questions as well in addition to this?
Yeah, I think that would be great. Could you do that verbally? Yeah.
Yeah, so as we're moving people around into the breakout rooms, and if you're joining us on YouTube, thank you for being here and thank you for just being present. The first 2 things we started to ask people to reflect upon around this idea of accountability, our first question was, are you in relationship with, excuse me, people of color? So are you in relationship with people of color? And if yes, do you actively discuss racism within your relationship? And do you strive to be in right relationship? And by that, we were defining being vulnerable and accountable and openness to critique, especially in those moments where our white supremacy and our internalized white superiority arises. And what steps could you take to deepen and bridge your personal relationships in this way? And one thing we tried to note was that these relationships are, we don't want them to be embedded in hierarchy. This is not an employee, a Black or Indigenous person of color that you've hired, but a relationship that's truly accountable. So that was question 1 about our relationships with people of color and how we are in right relationship. And then the second question pivots to ask us, are we in relationships of accountability with other anti-racist white folks? And do we actively discuss anti-racism within these relationships? And how could we deepen more of these relationships or begin building them if we haven't started to already? So the first 2 questions led us to this reflection that you can see on the screen and witness about noticing places in this that you might inspire growth. And what we were asking everyone to do was to use this 20 minutes to reflect as a group about the action and the accountability. So if you want to do some of that right now, you're welcome.
So I want to lift up for the small number of folks who are here in this particular Zoom room and not in a breakout room, and for whatever reason have not been able to get into a breakout room. I do have access to the links for the YouTube breakout rooms. So message me if that's you, and I will send you a link so that everybody can be in a breakout room who wants to be in one.
Thank you, Corinna.
And if you're with us out there on YouTube, we'll probably be coming back into the larger conversation in about 5 minutes, maybe 4 or 5 minutes.
Yay, everybody's coming back.
Got about 15 seconds and then the rest of them will close automatically. Nick, I think we could get started.
Cool. So as everybody's making their way back in, thanks for doing that, and hope that was useful to you or meaningful, and hope things came up. And so we'd like to we just have a short amount of time as we move towards a closing to just hear any reflections, anything that you want to popcorn back. We don't have time for full beginning, middle, and end stories, but things that came up in your group that you think would be worth sharing back to this group. We'll do so. I think the only way we're going to get a chance to do so right now is if you use the raise hand function, which Hannah described in the beginning. And maybe Hannah, can you point us to that again? It's under...
Yeah, I see folks already doing it.
Okay, great. They're here.
Little blue
So
hand.
we'll take So I've got a stack right now of Shannon, Flynn, Leah, Miller, Melissa, Shalsma. I think that's what I see. So I'd like to start there, and then we're just going to cut it off probably at about 4 or 5. I'm sorry that we can't get to everyone, but we do need to honor the time. So I'm just going to say Shannon Flynn, Shannon Molly Flynn. If you'd like to unmute yourself and share back, please join us.
Yeah,
Thank you.
It was super wonderful to be able to like talk it like in that space. I think the biggest thing that like I heard from our group was the fragility of perfectionism, you know, and like and that I like a quote that was bestowed upon me by someone else was that like we must get used to learning in public. And I think that was like is a really wonderful thing in this, you know, we're all pretty new to how active we are in this fight, and so figuring out and like being able someone in our group shared the failures of compassion, failures of courage, and failures of humility. I think that was really beautiful, that like we're going to fail, and how we fail and how we recover, like, and how we move forward from those failures is very important.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, we're going to have Leah Miller, and then after that will be Melissa Shalsma, and please correct me if I mispronounce your name, but Leah, are you with us? Could you unmute?
I am. Yeah, it's Leia, just so you know,
Leah,
like Star Wars.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Leah.
Yeah, so something that I was talking about and someone else helped articulate as well was like knowing intellectually the uselessness and the harm that white fragility does, and like being pretty good at not projecting those feelings outward, but then instead those feelings turning inward and having them still be there, and so not being able to work through that, and how the white fragility, even if it's not like playing out actively and affecting other people per se, the fact of it keeping you stuck in that feeling is getting in the way of doing the anti-racist work. And so like not really knowing how to get past that stuck place.
Nice. Thank you for sharing. Melissa, are you there? Can you unmute?
I am here. I think it was Emily Wall who brought it up in our group, but the idea of creating accountability groups seemed really powerful to me, in creating like a small group of whether it's colleagues from your area or around the country, where within that you guys can have some of these conversations on an ongoing basis. I thought that was just such a powerful suggestion and something I'd really like to act on. So
thank you.
Thank you, my breakout session, for a great conversation.
Yeah.
I want to
next we're gonna,
I want to encourage folks, sorry, Nick, I want to encourage folks to also notice that folks are putting in their reflections in the chat as well. So you can scroll up and down in that, and we'll try to find a way we may or may not be able to share just based on our community agreements, but just offering that. Sorry, Nick.
Yeah, awesome. No, we have, let's see, we're going to have Dominic, DeAndrea, and then Maureen Porter from Third Rail. Can Dominic with us?
Yeah, I'm right here. Thank you so much.
Cool. You're welcome.
Just shouting out, spotlighting something that was said by my colleague Jennifer from St. Louis in our group, that thinking about our reopening policies and procedures during the time of COVID and our anti-racist work as being in separate silos is perhaps an opportunity to think about merging those things and thinking about our reentry policy as an opportunity to do some deeper anti-racist work in regards to how we're welcoming and holding space. And I know all of us are going to be opening at different times and with different capacities, but there is the opportunity to kind of like rethink strategy and inclusion from the ground up.
That's amazing. Thank you. Maureen, then Eric Shopney.
Yeah, hi, thank you. That was amazing, Dominic. Thank you so much. It's something that struck me that Joellen Sweeney said in our group was this idea of us practicing talking about our whiteness, racializing language and talking about our whiteness, but not only in relationship to the Black artists and people and other people of color, which is I think is a really great reminder, right? And is part of our white supremacy, that we don't have to talk about our whiteness. And I also, just somebody else talked about this, but accountability groups, I feel like that kind of connectivity would be really amazing. And I'd love that if that were, doesn't have to be just regional, like across some of the people in this room. So I don't know how that happens.
Yeah, I want to offer, Maureen. Hi, Maureen. I want to offer that you can do that with 3 people that you already know. You do not need us to create a structure for that. I talk to the same 3 people once a month. So no, I know. I just want to encourage folks that you don't need to wait for any sort of structure. Get in there, find your people, and start.
We're going to take Eric Champney, James Stanley, and then Eli Nixon, and that's going to be it for our time for this. But for the rest of you, please keep sharing in the chat. We're not trying to cut anyone off, but we want to get to the last moment of our session together. So Eric, then James, and Eli. Eric?
Hi, I'm Eric Champney, and that was a great group. That was a really, really great group. Thank you very much. I'm a playwright, and a lot of what's been whirling through my head, not just in the past few days, but in the past few months and the past couple of years is where my place is and what kind of stories I should be telling. And one of the things that I've always very arrogantly prided myself in is being a very brave storyteller, and shit's about to get a whole lot braver. And that's what I got. Thank you.
Thank you. James, then Eli, and then I'll pass it to Hannah.
James, we can't hear you.
I think you're muted, James.
I'm sorry. I'm very sorry.
You're all good. Go for it.
I'll be very brief. I think what I'm about to say sort of echoes something that Shannon said at the beginning of this session, this part of the session, which was one of the things that came up for us was this perfectionism and the fear of making a mistake, and something that someone else, I apologize for getting your name, of the fear of learning in public. I'm in an educational institution, and that there's a desperate fear of failing students by demonstrating failure in your own work. And I think that is the brave thing that we have to do as leaders, is to learn and fail in public. And that's really what I got out of our wonderful session. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll have Eli, and then that'll be it for now for the share back. Thank you all. These are rich. Eli, are you there?
Hi, can you hear me?
Sure can, Eli, go ahead.
Hi, I was just volunteering to talk to anybody who wants to. I co-founded an anti-racism working group for white parents at my kid's school 5 years ago that's still going strong. And I put my email in the chat. It's ramshackleenterprises@gmail.com. Delighted to talk to anybody who wants to talk about starting one at your own school. It's so doable, and we've learned a lot together, and now we're more well equipped to respond to this moment, which I'm sure will keep happening. So thanks for holding space, and be in touch if you want to talk.
Thank you.
That's awesome, Eli.
Sure, there's many more reflections we can have, but we're going to shift over to Hannah now to lead us out. Hannah and Corinna are going to lead us out around how to be more accountable for ourselves.
And folks, we're actually not going to talk anymore. We're going to take a minute to do some group action. We've got nearly 400 of you here in this space. We've got many, many more, hundreds more in the YouTube. And though it is 4:30 and we had intended to stop after 90, I hear someone's lovely child in the background. Just want to let you know. I wish I could be hanging out with that kid too. But we're going to keep going for another 15 minutes. We're going to keep going because it's time for us all to do a moment of action together. And here's what we're going to do. So I encourage you to stay if you can stay, even if you're listening. You don't have to participate actively, but even if you're listening to what we are activating each other to do right now, because you can do it while you're multitasking. So here's what we're going to take this moment to do. We're going to share, Corinna's going to share in the chat, just one compilation, state-by-state compilation of organizations, many of which are frontline organizations, not all of which are necessarily led by BIPOC, by BIPOC folks, many of which are serving Black and Indigenous people of color. I know you all have more, and you have more compilations, you have more places that are seeking resources in this moment. We are going to together model redistributing resources. So once that goes in the chat, I want you to open that list. I want you to open the other list that you've been receiving. I want you to send other lists into the chat. If you have up-to-date information, feel free to share it in the chat. We're going to take the next 10 minutes to select one of these places that is seeking resources. Make sure as you're selecting that place that it is serving Black and Indigenous people of color in any community really. But these are organized generally around the communities that are experiencing a lot of strife in this moment. If you do not have the resources to donate, if you don't have the resources in this moment to do that redistribution, what we're going to challenge you to do is to share it on your social media, is to share, hey, this is an organization that I really feel strongly about supporting. If you have resources, do it. You can start one of those Facebook fundraisers if that feels right to you. So if you don't have the resources to donate right now, share it. If you're not on social media, send it to 2 white people in your network, just 2. So one of those 3 actions, we're gonna ask everybody paying attention to do right now. If you wanna turn your video off because you're gonna get your credit card out and you're gonna type it into the little PayPal block, go ahead and do it. I'm gonna go find my credit card and I'm gonna do it right now. But we're gonna spend, and I'll give you time checks, we're gonna spend now about the next 8 minutes. Take a minute to donate. If you can't donate, take a minute to share on social media. If you can't share on social media, take a minute to share with white colleagues. This is our moment to put our money where our mouth is, put our networks where our mouths are, and then we're gonna share some other accountability actions in just a few minutes. So I'm gonna be quiet. I'm gonna come back in to start sharing more accountability actions as folks are finishing with that call to action. I see some really wonderful lists coming in here. Oh, I haven't seen this Obama list, cool. I imagine that there are lists coming in on the YouTube too, lists of resource aggregators. I wanna also say that the Blackout Tuesday action, I've been working on this facilitation all day, but the messages that I've been seeing from folks who are as a part of the Leaderful Black Lives Matter movement is that this didn't necessarily come from Black Lives Matter, that it was perhaps misappropriated. So as far as deference to not posting on social media, I think if we were amplifying actions that are in support of and in solidarity with communities of color, it is not going to be at cross purpose with that movement, but I respect anyone else's additional information or additional thoughts around that. Or you can just stay off social media and email it to two people. It's another option. So we're moving towards finding a place. Maybe it's a place you haven't yet discovered. I see folks leaving their cameras to take out their credit cards. Bless you. Nick and Corinna, I'm going to leave for a second.
Got you.
Beautiful, and thank you for those who are sort of reporting out and saying, here's where I sent my money. That's great. Thank you for that. And for those of you who are finishing that action, if you're still finishing that action, keep it up. It's great. There are a couple of other specific actions that we want to share with you. And I wonder, Nick and Corinna, maybe I can take the first three, the first two personal and organizational, and then we can I can ask for y'all's support in the latter. Yeah, cool.
Sounds great.
Great. So as you're finishing making that donation, let's think about other ways to be accountable. Let's think about other ways we can immediately get into relationships of accountability at the personal, the organizational, and the field and sector-wide level, right? So we talked about this already. Maureen talked about this, and we had a little conversation about what it means to immediately activate even a small group of white folks in your network to start talking, to start meeting, to start engaging with each other, to start holding each other accountable to the values that you intend to live by, the anti-racist actions that you intend to take. Determine how you'll check in with each other, when that will be, how you'll challenge each other and support each other, build trust with each other, so when that challenge comes, it can be moved through and you can come back into right relationship with one another. You can use the people you met here. You can use white folks in your family, your social group, your professional group. Let's make that happen now. 2 people, 10 people, whatever works for you. Another personal action. Let's take action communicating at the highest level, the state level, the federal level, with respect to signing petitions, to calling the DA in Minneapolis, to writing the DA in Minneapolis. I'm giving a local example, but there are many examples. Let's do one of those things, if not all 3 today, regarding an issue that is of imminent and immediate importance to the preservation and the essential nature of lives of Black and Indigenous people of color. And if you want to pop those links in, what are the petitions you're signing now? What are the letters you're writing now? Pop them into the chat. That's great. That's another personal action that I want you all to do today. I'm just going to say it like that. I want us to do it today. Organizational action. Write a letter to the leadership at your organization. Write a letter to everybody at your organization. How are you holding the folks that you work for, the spaces that you work in, accountable in this moment and going forward? And Rachel Cargill, the amazing activist Rachel Cargill, provided a template that many of you have already seen that is literally word for word. Here is a template that you can copy paste. It has been prepared for you folks to help you write that email, to take that step, to approach and ask, what are we doing? And as a white person, I can step in and I can support here. I can support in making sure there's anti-racist dialogue constantly within our organization and anti-racist action taken. So I'm gonna share that template. Thank you, I see you all asking for it. The best place I found it was on Facebook. It's also on Instagram, and it is currently a little bit like covered up by the words template. So I think we can do the work of typing it out ourselves from what she shared with us. I'm going to put it in the chat now, and I'm going to ask my friends to continue to do that because there's a lot of messages coming in right now. So if we can amplify that Facebook post from Rachel Cargill. She's also on Instagram, Rachel Elizabeth Cargill, and sign up for the Great Unlearn, exactly, which is her organization. You can use that template to hold your organization accountable. The first step. Nick, do you want to talk more about that?
Excuse me, about the next steps?
Yes.
Yeah, great. So also as an organization, just thinking about where do we amplify and where do we lead? And how do we make and how do we take space? And how do we learn where and how do we use to have our power? Hannah used the word leaderful movements. And there are many of us who are in positions of power. And we encourage a way of thinking that is not always about relinquishing your power, but it's about learning to listen and be in right relationship and using your power sometimes to impact and affect long-standing systematic change within our organizations. And also just thinking of another sort of field-wide, sector-wide action that we can take. Just develop some art and or creative project that calls for justice. I'm gonna put a resource in the link for you, but what can you do in your own practice and your own art making and your writing and the way that you use the fullness of your being in our very, very powerful practice of creating art to do a piece of work that calls to and responds to justice. Corinna, you wanna lead us home?
I do. There's a few other things that we can consider about field-wide collective action. Folks who've been doing this work for a while, Hannah and Nick will help me by dropping these resources in there into the chat. Alternate Roots has been doing really deep work on this. There's some resources for social change that we're going to share. Folks may know about Showing Up for Racial Justice or SURGE. This week is a week of action, and there are a lot of local SURGE chapters that may be near you. I also want to lift up that last time we met together, we talked about white supremacy culture and some antidotes, but I want to share that I know no stronger antidote than the principles of the Black Lives Matter movement. Many people are not familiar with their principles, but they describe a world that I would love to live in and that I'm willing to fight for. And so if someone can put those principles in the chat, they are really strong and worth your attention. And Hannah Fenlon is a part of a group called Calling Us In that is organizing white folks to show up for Black, Indigenous people of color. And Hannah's gonna let us know how to get in touch and get activated with those organizers, of which she is one. So if you've been dazzled by her, you can continue to be in relationship with her through the Calling Us In.
And I get to invite my friend and colleague Tiffany Wilhelm to actually share that message and that invitation to activate. Tiffany, are you here somewhere? And if you're not, I can do it. Thanks, Amanda. Tiffany's not here. Wait, am I getting a thing? Amanda, gosh, community care. This is great. Awesome. So wonderful. So the Calling Us In network, I'm gonna do the best I can. And I was gonna invite my friend Tiffany Wilhelm from Pittsburgh, an amazing activist and organizer, to invite folks to express interest in that space. It has been burbling and brewing for over a year at this point, and has been sort of shepherded by a nucleus of folks who are really committed to building an anti-racist white action network in the arts and have been in communication with networks of color throughout the country. And really what we are attempting to provide is a network that is based in calls to action, that is based in urgent response, that is loosely organized so that we can respond quickly in moments within our field that need attention and need the amplification, by white leaders, so that we can be in actual solidarity with our colleagues of color, be in actual solidarity with our colleagues of color when they ask theater institutions to uphold a process of hiring executive leaders that is transparent and that is responsive to their needs and the needs of their community, for one example. So this is the network we are building. We want you to be a part of it. It is, the full release of the network is forthcoming. And so what we're gonna provide for you, and Amanda Delheimer, the amazing Amanda Delheimer, put it in the chat, and we will re-put it in the chat, is an interest form. It's a Google interest form. And if you are feeling activated now and you want to continue to be connected to a collective that, let me be clear, is not affiliated with any one institution. It is a collective of a multiplicity of white folks of many genders, from many locations, from many institutions and outside of institutions, who are forming together to really create clear calls to action for everybody. Okay, so I've put it in the chat. We're going to keep putting it in the chat because this chat is full and on fire. And I want folks to sign up, and know that when you sign up, when you put your email in that form, you're going to be notified quite soon, at least at some point this month. And I hope I'm not saying that wrong, Tiffany and others, but I think that's right, to what's next for the network, to the statement of purpose, which has been formed and is receiving a lot of feedback. And we'll go from there. We'll go from there, folks. So please do sign up. Corinna, can you close us out officially?
I'm gonna close us out. And you know, we were gonna have 2 collective poems, but we only have time for 1, and that's okay. And this last one harkens back to where we shared Dr. King's quote, calling out the white moderate, and specifically about the difference between negative peace, which is the absence of tension, which means when we are protecting the comfort, privilege, and power of white people, but calling that peace, and positive peace, which is the presence of justice. And so I'm asking us in this moment to imagine a moment of positive peace that is going to occur in the near future. So we are not looking for beautiful images 50 years in the future of everyone loving each other. No, we're talking about in the near future, moments of positive peace that you are going to manifest. And the key to positive peace is it is the presence of justice, which means it may make you uncomfortable. It may put you in a position where you're a little bit scared, but that you know that being in that position of positive peace is going to lead toward, is going to be in the presence of justice. So all you got to do to make this poem, y'all, is positive peace will be, and then whatever it's going to be for you. And that's going to be how we're going to end our time together. And just put that in the chat, and we will manifest this positive peace that you are all going to share. So as we continue to manifest these beautiful positive pieces, and we draw to a close, the last thing I want to offer is that earlier we spent some time naming emotions in our body and where they lived. And the last thing I want to offer you is to just ask yourself where courage lives in your body, and to get familiar with where it lives, to make a habit of like knowing where it lives, so that when you are showing up for positive peace, you just know where to find that courage. It's right there and you can count on it. And so I invite all of us as we walk away today to find where courage lives in our bodies and get real familiar with it, because it is going to be needed over and over again in the days to come. And we will be in touch. We have your emails. This is just one meeting. There will be more. I look to my friends, Nick and Hannah, if there is anything else that we want to share as this positive peace continues to manifest.
Gratitude, and gratitude for the unseen work that is being done by the folks at TCG, by all of the team members at TCG who are in this Zoom room and not, who have been holding down a lot this week and every week. So thank you.
Nick, are you good?
One breath, Corinna.
Let's do one breath. Sure. Ready?
Thank you, friends. Let's stay
Thank you.
Let's stay active
Much love
and
to you all.
present. Stay active, stay going. We love you. We'll see you soon. I love that people are continuing to hang out with us. Hi, we see you.
No, you go.
Should we end the YouTube stream though?
Well, I can't now because someone else is the host in this wild
I
tech
can do
adventure.
It. Bye, YouTube. I did it.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
Thanks for being here. Oh yeah, I'm gonna save the chat. Let's see.
I saved the chat, but of course your chat will be different than my chat, but I saved it.
Oh,
so we've got this
save?
positive peace poems we've got.
Okay, does it save at the moment that you click save? I don't really know that. Okay.
It does. I'm also going to stop recording. That's good.